Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
With Mike McGuire.
Stand up, son. Let me take a good look at you.
This guy's a serious professional.
You know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, the professional wrestling. Do I have your attention now?
Done shilling. I'm done shilling, okay?
Let's get this show on the road.
I love professional wrestling.
Hey there, I don't know about you, but my wrestling heart is full this week. No pun intended, but I'll talk to you about that in just a bit. Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling for the week of January 26th and 27th. This show, part of the Celebrate Wrestling Podcast Network, which you can subscribe to absolutely for free. Or you can also check us out on radio stations across Canada, including CKXU-FM here in Lethbridge, where I am based, or at other radio stations, which you can find at McGuireShow.com. Now, we've got lots to talk about this week. Of course, there's lots of wrestling again. WWE had a big Saturday night's main event over the weekend. AEW had a big collision. The question is, how many people saw it? TNA's got a new champion. JBL keeps showing up everywhere. It must be nice to get paid to go to all these big wrestling shows. Nevertheless, it is a pleasure to be here with you. We don't ask that you pay for nothing here, but some people have said, hey, we want to support the show, so you're always invited to do that. You can find details at McGuireShow.com on how you can contribute. Leave a tip through PayPal, but it's not necessary. Like I said, we do everything here for free because we love talking about pro wrestling. I'm going to get into it a little more in just a bit, but my Saturday was not actually watching Saturday night's main event or doing anything else. I was running around town with Bret the Hitman Hart, who, if you listen to the show with any regularity, you know is my favorite wrestler of all time. But he's become a bit of a buddy, and we got to hang out, and I got to hear so many cool stories. In fact, I'm going to spring one on Dave Meltzer here when he calls in on the show. So we're going to talk about that a bit. Joe Aguinaldo is also going to be on the show. Plus, the Royal Rumble is coming up. We are next week going to have a roundtable discussion with all the members of the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. That means Mitch, Dimitri, Andy, myself, Joe. Maybe we'll even get Mouth in there. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to watch the Rumble, but we'll see. But make sure you are joined up with the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page because we'll want to hear from you as we do another Yay Boo on WWE's Kickstarter to the road to WrestleMania. All right, I'm not going to dilly-dally because I have some extra story time today coming up. Let's take you right there. Every week we compile the top 5 news stories in pro wrestling, slap them together, and give them to you in a little feature called The 5 Count. So let's go.
You want to hear the breaking news?
1241 East Main Street in Stamford, Connecticut is now sold to a real estate firm. You might recognize that address, especially if you're like me and you would get WWF magazines back in the day, and that's where you first saw the home address of WWF headquarters. And now the building is officially sold. Titan Towers is no more. Now, what's interesting about this is whoever bought it got it for a steal of a deal. The whole building sold for $3.75 million. The new owners say they're going to convert the building into apartments. Now, I don't know if that means they're actually going to just fix the building up itself or if they're just going to tear the whole thing down. But it's kind of interesting to know that for the price of some ordinary houses in different parts of Canada and the United States, you could have owned the old WWE headquarters. First order of business, tear out all the rugs, especially in one office. Well, this is an interesting turn of events. After reportedly over 18 million new subscriptions to Netflix, with many of them considered to be due to the WWE content making its way there, there's now a report from WrestleNomics saying that Amazon Prime may be the latest carrier to add AEW pay-per-views to their content. Now, this isn't the first time that Prime has looked at pay-per-view events, and carrying them live streaming wouldn't be that much of a stretch for them either. However, this would be a big win for AEW as far as getting international content distributed on an easy-to-use platform. Now, what's extra interesting about this is since it would be a pay-per-view event, you wouldn't have to be a Prime member to get access to it. You just have to use the platform to watch the show. There isn't much else on the news of this deal, so not sure if that would affect their current distribution with things like Triller and PPV.com, but you never know. Well, if you were following along with the saga of Toni Storm versus Mariah May as they get ready for Grand Slam Australia coming up on February the 15th, timeless Toni Storm made her return on AEW's Collision.
You may be the woman from hell, but you came from my womb, and I will shove you back up there and spit you out. For I am timeless Toni Storm, and I'm gonna rip your off.
Now, if you haven't been following the angle since losing her world title to Mariah May, Toni Storm disappeared and then said she was quitting All Elite Wrestling. At least, timeless Toni Storm said that. A few weeks later, Toni Storm, looking like the Toni Storm of old, would come out, almost as though she had forgotten anything about the last few years of her career. Well, the jig is up, and now it looks like that match could even main event the AEW Grand Slam show in Australia. Just saying, Toni Storm, it's her home country, world championship. It all makes sense, right? Well, this story broke later on Sunday afternoon, but Ed Wiskoski, who also was known as Colonel De Beers, a very controversial character back in the old days of the AWA, has passed away. Now, Wiskoski was known by different names, including the Polish Prince, but as De Beers, he was actually known as a South African wrestler who even went as far as to push apartheid. What makes this more stunning is that this was actually broadcast weekly on ESPN when AWA had the national TV deal. Wiskoski is remembered as not being anything like that character, though. Several messages are pouring in through the Cauliflower Alley Club and various social media. Our friend Greg Oliver also has a very in-depth obituary up at slamwrestling.net. You can check that out online as well. And news coming out of Japan that affects North America, Omos has announced that he is returning to WWE. Now, Omos has actually been in Japan wrestling for Noah, even became one of the GHC Tag Team Champions. However, he has now passed that title on to Daga, so Jack Morris and Daga will now be the champions there. But Omos says that, don't worry, he may just come back for it. Omos hasn't been seen in a WWE ring since the 2024 Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. However, people like The Undertaker have been very keen on him for a long time, so we'll see what could happen for the Nigerian Giant. We got Dave Meltzer standing by in just a bit, plus we're going to yay boo on this past weekend's Saturday night's main event with some of your feedback coming up in a few moments. But this past weekend in Lethbridge, where I am, was pretty special for a lot of wrestling fans of all different ages, and I felt a little weird talking about this by myself, so he's going to join us early now. Joe Aguinaldo is here. Hey, Joe.
I saw your Facebook post, and I've been meaning to ask you about that. It looked really cool. What's going on?
And I need to preface this by saying I'm not trying to humble brag and be like, oh, look what I got to do with Bret Hart all day, but this is a guy who, and even on our Facebook page, Bob Hunt said earlier, you know, you always hear these stories about how bitter Bret is, and I want to share other stories because, like the name of the feed, want to celebrate wrestling. And I think that he sometimes gets painted with a bit of an unfair brush here. So he has a partnership with a Calgary distillery, and they're called Romero Rum. A few years ago, they got together and asked Bret to become kind of their brand ambassador. And so they did some limited edition Hitman rum bottles, and they've done a Cuba Libre, which I keep promising I'm going to send some to Dan Levransky. So anyway, every once in a while, they will go on tours to different markets, different cities. They've been to places like Brooklyn, to PEI, I think they were saying. And what Bret will do is he will sign bottles for people that come in and you know, pick up a bottle of rum or whatever. So they have 3 different styles, 3 different price points. So it's not like you have to buy like a $60 bottle or whatever. You can get like a smaller little $17 thing or whatever. And Bret's happy to sign everything and anything, which we talked about on the interview I posted from my radio show on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Like, Bret's really usually happy to sign an autograph anywhere. But we go to this event and realize that Lethbridge is, we'll say, about 2.5 hours away if you were to go door to door. So from Bret's house to the liquor store that we were at yesterday. So he's starting at about 7:30 in the morning on his way down to Lethbridge. They get here just after 10, and then the bottle signing is supposed to start at noon. People start showing up early, as wrestling fans tend to do. So we're starting the signing all of a sudden at like 11 o'clock because that's when people are showing up.
Wow.
The line was pretty steady for almost all 3 hours. There was like maybe 1 or 2 lulls, and then all of a sudden another 20, 30 people would show up. So we're thinking, they gave me a count of like 300 and something bottles went out the door yesterday.
Wow.
So imagine, first of all, you've already signed 300 autographs. You've met with probably at least, because people were buying multiple, so I'll say probably about 250 to 275 fans.
Right.
I'm there working as kind of the crowd control and photographer, the meet and greet guy, and just, hey, say hi to Bret. Don't forget your that sort of thing. Well, people would get their picture and then forget the bottle they just had signed by him, because they were just so excited to meet him. Then we have about an hour for lunch because there's another show we're doing afterwards. I want you to take a wild guess where Bret wanted to go for lunch. I mean, I came up with some of the finest dining places, some places that were nearby, the casino, whatever. Where do you think Bret Hart wanted to have lunch?
Well, I was going to say something like an Applebee's.
You're pretty close. How about Denny's?
Oh, dang. Get those Grand Slams, baby.
That's the wrestler on the road right there. That's
it was like, or I was thinking maybe IHOP or something like that.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah. We go there and, have a little bite to eat. Bret takes a load off for a few minutes, and then I went ahead to get ready for the next appearance, and then Bret and Thomas Romero, who owns the Romero Distilling, and that was it. That was the whole crew. It was the three of us, basically.
Wow.
And then another guy named Zach from Thomas was at the show, because what this show was the Alberta Food and Beverage Expo. So it's one of those like tasting things where you go, you buy a bunch of tickets, then you can go from restaurant to bar to distillery to whatever.
Oh, yeah. And then
try out samples of things, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Sure.
So we're not selling any bottles there. So it's literally just a meet and greet or a tasting, and that's it. So it probably went through another 250, 300 fans, and this is as they are getting, shall we say, a little more inebriated as time goes on. They drove back to Calgary after this thing.
What time would that have been?
Leaving about 9:30.
Ooh, it's a long day, man.
Great fans. Bret was awesome. The Romero folks were awesome. And some of the greatest moments, I talked about him a little bit last week. A guy named Chris I met at one of the local shows here. This guy's like a area manager for a big company that's well known, and he brought his father, who's in his 80s, and the two of them, it was like a father and son moment, just walking into this co-op liquor store and seeing Bret. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's awesome.
And not to embarrass him too much, but Chris was literally in tears. So I got, this is grown ass men in their 50s and 60s who are just taking moments and just being reduced to remembering their memories of Stampede and remembering Bret Hart's career. And as much as we like to sit here and be like crabby wrestling fans sometimes, there's a lot more good than there are crabby people, I find. And I needed to see that.
And I think part of it too is that, not to sound like a media shill or whatever, but having worked in media, unfortunately, the bad stuff sells. So that's the stuff people are going to report on. But I agree with you. There is some really good stuff out there. And for that one bad rumor that you might hear about your favorite wrestler, chances are he's done 10 really good things that you're never going to hear about.
I want to give you another quick story here before we move on with the show here. So yesterday I met this kid. I think he's 29 now. Yeah. He's as tall as 10 men. Okay. This is a tall dude. His name is Matt.
All right.
And Matt, 14 years ago, at the age of 15, had suffered a stroke.
Wow. Whoa.
Who else do we know in this equation that has suffered a stroke? Bret Hart.
Right.
So I guess 15 years ago, Bret actually made a point to visit Matt a few times.
Wow. After
he had his stroke, and now he's still doing great. So Matt came up again 14 years later, and Bret kind of got to remember all that, There's a girl who comes in. She doesn't know who Bret the Hitman Hart is at all. And her dad is a huge fan. But unfortunately, he's at home right now dealing with cancer.
Right.
So she comes up and asks for an autograph for him. And again, just like a river of tears of gratitude. We take these wrestlers and these entertainers for granted sometimes. Mm-hmm. People were coming up with their kids, and they were showing them pictures of them as kids with Bret, and then saying this is the same guy, and then getting new pictures, right?
Yeah.
There was just so many great moments. And to be just the fly on the wall, because again, I'm just the camera monkey there. Nobody knows who the hell I am. A few people knew me from the radio show, but to anybody else, I'm just the guy taking the picture.
Right.
And it was like just this awesome thing to see. And I know that is probably what keeps these wrestlers and these stars going through these things, because otherwise it was a long damn day.
Well, and the scary thing is, too, if you really think about it, okay, you guys were just doing, like, photo ops, right?
Yeah.
Imagine back in Bret's heyday when he was, like, the crown jewel of the company at the time, WWF champion at the time. He's doing press. You know, he's doing all these, like, you know, media shots. On top of that, he's wrestling every night. And back then, that schedule was insane. And then on top of that, he's probably maybe going out partying with the boys for a little bit. And let's do that 6 nights a week. Yeah. You know? Yeah,
well, that's just it, right? So that's just one set of experiences. There's going to be somebody that says, oh, I saw Bret in the airport and he was a tool to me. You just don't know the situations around things. And we had a moment where the manager at the Denny's comes up to us and says, are you Bret Hart, the famous wrestler? And says, yeah. He's like, yeah, there's a man down here who'd like to meet you. And again, Bret said what he always says. Okay, I'll come when I'm done eating, you know?
Yeah,
and that was fair. It. They probably had a moment after Bret was done eating, and that was it.
Oh, before we go, though, I have to ask.
Yes.
Okay, you don't have to tell me what, but did anyone ask Bret to sign something, let's say, inappropriate?
We didn't talk about that in the interview beforehand. No, nobody asked for anything signed. Here's another thing you just don't do. Okay, stop asking him to put you in the sharpshooter because he's not going to do it. Mostly.
No, thank you.
You won't be able to walk afterwards. But in all seriousness, just don't. This was actually really funny. My friend Laura, who was actually on one of our We've Seen a Movies.
I remember her. Yep.
Works here at the radio station with me. So she came up and she was all in awe of Bret. So she comes up and I was like, yeah, get in here. And what I didn't tell her was, I'm going to totally rat you out right now. So as she comes up, I said, Bret, this is my good friend Laura. She's on the radio with me as well. Like, great person, huge wrestling fan of Shawn Michaels.
Oh.
And she is. She's a massive Shawn Michaels fan. So I totally dimed her out, and it was worth it because Bret had a good laugh at it. He actually like feigned he was going to attack her, you know, like, but it was just one of those things. Another kid showed up in a Shawn Michaels shirt and we're like, all right, dangerous territory, but sure. But that's just it. You know, I you know, he doesn't have a problem with Shawn and anybody else. And you know, that's just it. People are looking for problems. He's had bad experiences with people over the years that he's talked about a lot, and that's where people get the bit. Well, that's just it. And that's what I said to them afterwards. I said, like, who can look back at their life and say, you know, I probably could have handled this better.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just it. So overall, I got to say, just a great experience. And I think that if you give most of these wrestlers, and don't get me wrong, I've met some really tool bag wrestlers too, but for the most part, I think that it's how you present yourself and how you come into the situation that's more going to reflect the situation coming out. And yeah, so that was it. But dear Lord, were we both tired after
Well, that is a pretty long day. So well
anyway,
done,
that's the Bret Hart story from following around for a meet and greet all day. And thank you, Joe, for that. Coming up, we're going to talk to Dave Meltzer here as McGuire on Wrestling continues. Thanks for being here.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
CKXU-FM 88.3 in Lethbridge is Southern Alberta's true alternative radio station.
The cream of the crop! Nobody does it better.
Proudly carrying McGuire on Wrestling every week.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to listen to,
This is gonna be a slobber knocker!
check out our NCRA award-winning lineup of programs or stream us anytime at ckxu.com.
It's time for the Wrestling Observer Insider with Dave Meltzer, McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, once upon a time, this guy wrote a report about an Iron Man match between Bret the Hitman Hart and Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, you may have used the words that Flair carried Bret through the whole match. Is this ringing a bell now?
I mean, I remember there were a couple of them, but there's they may have only had one match, but it was like 30 plus years ago.
Right.
Yeah. So Bret was mad and now we're friends.
Yeah. And he said the same thing, but
yeah.
Because I just told Joe on our show earlier, spent the whole day with him. I was basically helping manage a couple appearances for him, but in the downtime, he loves telling me old stories. And all of a sudden, your name comes up. And I'm like, oh, well, I have Dave on the show every week, right? He's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, you guys are cool now, though. And he's like, yeah. But he told me all about this. And I guess he was telling me the story of how basically he had pieced the match together. And that was basically his match. And then you'd gotten the report, because I don't think you were at the show. But
I was in Boston, I think, or somewhere.
Yeah. Anyway, so the report was that Flair carried Bret through the entire Iron Man match. And Bret was so hot about it. And he said flat out, he's like, then I see in the Meltzer sheets, he says this. So, yeah. But that was a fun little story that came out of yesterday, as were a bunch of others that eventually I might tell over time. But nevertheless, Dave Meltzer here with us once again. And, that's got to be how many years of doing this again? Yeah, you get some stories, right? And sometimes you get a little bit of maybe bad intel from someone else. Yeah, but either way, it was a lot of fun. So anyway, just thought I'd let you know he was thinking about you, sort of. You're laughing now. That's good. Let's talk about what's going on in the world of professional wrestling. There was a lot that happened Saturday night, and I'm not just talking about Saturday night's main event, but we were just talking about this on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page, as a matter of fact. Big collision last night, including a pivotal turning point in the Toni Storm, Mariah May angle.
Yeah, they did a good angle last night.
Now, I want to throw it to you. This is going to sound negative. I don't mean it to. But is this a wasted opportunity on Collision that could have been on Dynamite? Or is this a case of having to feed Collision some big bones here?
Well, it's a weird one because it's not just on Collision, but it was on a Collision that the audience is going to be really low because of Saturday night's main event.
Right.
So if they had done something, ahead of time of like trying to build up this Collision, like kind of to be competitive, you know what I mean? It's like we're going to have like all kinds of championship matches and this is going to be a super loaded Collision and like basically go, look, they're putting on a major show. We're putting on a major show. We're going to lose, but we're telling everyone in advance this is like a major show. You really didn't do that. It was kind of like this was just a Collision. And, they're going to have a face-to-face, and it's going to be a step in the angle. But you didn't know it was going to be the big turning point in the angle. So, because of that, it's not like they probably had a great audience for it. But timing-wise, I think that they wanted to do it right around now as far as, like, the timing leading up to the Brisbane show. I think you want it 3 weeks ahead. So this is 3 weeks ahead. Could they have done it this coming Wednesday and more people saw it? Yeah, for sure. But they also do want to build Collision. But I think it would have been better to build Collision last week when it had a decent audience, right. Decently good audience, rather than this week where I would expect it to have a very low audience and to shoot this major angle. So, I get the criticism. At the same time, they're going to replay the angle on Wednesday anyway, so it's not like people aren't going to see it.
It's interesting to me, and they are still kind of making them two different shows now between Collision and Dynamite. There tends to be still more in-ring action on Collision, and they're relying a little more on angles on Dynamite now, which is kind of what you could compare Raw and SmackDown usually, although SmackDown having to draw out some angles now to fill the 3 hours. But that always seems to be kind of the formula for shows that have this split brand approach, right? When it comes to Wednesday's Dynamite, there was a big angle, and again, I want to give credit where it's due. I was listening to Dave LaGreca over on Busted Open, and he was having a baby about this. The fact that the Kenny Omega Will Ospreay team up happened within basically 20 minutes. They came out of this vicious hatred for each other, Omega especially being the one that has no reason to want to help Ospreay.
Well, it was like a week ago you knew it was coming, probably 2 weeks ago. But a week ago.
But it happened really fast on that show, Dave. And I'm wondering
if but has a point. It was an angle where they had to stand together. That's not unusual in wrestling at all. Not every story is dragged out like WWE, where it's like you see it coming for months. And AEW does it sometimes even more. This was one where it was like, and again, February 15th, this is the key. It's like, we got to get the storyline going for February 15th. They didn't have time to waste. So, and you got to remember, Kenny, it's not like Kenny's been back for 6 months. That they had to build this whole thing up. It's like Kenny came back January, whatever, like a couple weeks ago. And then they started the angle right away, and they wanted the tag team match announced this week. So, I think that's kind of an unfair criticism because it's like, what do you want to do? You spring it in Australia, like with a week's notice? You give it 3 weeks notice. and they shot a great angle. So, I mean, not every, again, some stories, if Kenny had been back since October, then you could say, look, they had all these months. They didn't. They were, they were close on time. He came back on a certain date, and they got a show February 15th, and they wanted that tag team. And they could have just said, hey, they're both baby faces, and you're going to be a team right away. But then you don't acknowledge that, they had the feud, which WWE and other companies routinely do. You just pretend that it never happened. And they're both baby faces, so it's okay to team. So instead, you acknowledge the fact that they had a feud. Then they're basically by themselves against four guys. They're fighting together, and it's like, okay, we need to stick together right now. So, I didn't have a problem with that at all.
It's interesting that the world of pacing. I do appreciate that on the WWE side that Kevin Owens is actually the voice of reason right now with the whole Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns things, and that's what's built their feud. On the same side, on the AEW side, I mean, yeah, we can say we can drag out stories too. Keith Lee versus Swerve Strickland, still waiting for that match. But
yeah, waiting for a long time.
I hope Keith Lee's okay.
I mean, how long did it take me to get frickin' Hook and Christian, and then you did a DQ? And it's like, by the time they did the match, Taz was already back. So what was the reason for the feud? And, so it's like, AEW to me actually drags it out too much most of the time. So in this case, when they got to it, and again, they were forced because of February 15th deadline, so, that was the deal. They wanted this certain match on Feb 15. There's, Kyle Fletcher in a key match, part of it. I think whatever they have in Los Angeles is stems from this. So it's not like you save this for Los Angeles. This is more of and it's a tag match. Maybe you break off into singles or whatever you're doing in Los Angeles. So, no, I didn't have a problem with that at all.
I hope if nothing else,
actually, I think that criticism is really short-sighted when you really look at the big picture of it.
Well, I hope that Samoa Joe eventually goes after the man that drove him through a freshly built wall at Scotiabank Saddledome.
I know, Joe and Jericho. Yeah, that's one that's forgotten. But that happens in wrestling too. There's almost a thing of like, well, if it happened so many months ago, everyone's forgot about it. But to me, when Joe came back, my thought is just like, why isn't he going against Jericho? Yeah. So hopefully he does.
Maybe we'll get there. Maybe we will get there. Okay, talking to Dave Meltzer here. You're listening to McGuire on Wrestling on the radio and online. You can find us on social media under the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page, also the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Dave, someone else in AEW that made a lot of news over the last week or so. We didn't really talk about it last week because it was still kind of just coming out, but there was an interesting story from Wade Keller saying and speculating about the status of Britt Baker in AEW. And I think it's fair to say that was a speculative report, but I know you and other people have said there may be some legs to it. How serious?
There's smoke to the fire. I mean, it's not like he came out of something out of thin air. There's something there. And he never said that she's going to WWE. I mean, somehow what he said, which, is essentially what was going on, was taken to, she's going to WWE. And it's like, I mean, there's years, I think, before she can go. And is Tony going to use her again? I mean, it's Tony. You're never going to know what, right now he's using other people. I mean, will he use her again? I mean, I would suspect it, but, you don't know. I mean, he's got, and WWE does that, but not nearly as much. I mean, they have times where you just have people that you're just not using until you use them again. And sometimes it's disciplinary, sometimes it's other things. I'm not sure where she stands right now, or when or if she'll be used again. Like I said, there's smoke to the fire, but it's a legit story that a top star is not being used. But as far as saying she's on her way to WWE, I think that's when we addressed it, was like, come on, guys, put a break to it. It's so premature to say that. This isn't Ricky Starks where, he's going to WWE. I mean, she might not. They might sit there and come to a new contract. It's a lot of moving parts and a long, long time before they get there. So a lot can happen in whatever it is that's got left, but it's a couple of years.
To quote Mitch over on our other podcast, the Ultimate Commentary Table, it's like you're in my notes, because that was going to be the next question I was going to ask. There was a report that came out that Ricky had officially asked for his release from AEW, and that was denied. Do you know if there's any truth to that?
It's probably true. I mean, all those guys ask for releases from both companies. And and routinely that are under contract and get turned down. That's not unusual, especially for someone who wants to leave. I mean, look, it's not a secret. Like I said, Ricky Starks for a long time has wanted to go. That's the main reason he's probably not on AEW television. It's kind of like Tony Khan and has the different mentality. The other promoters put him on TV and beat him to death. And I don't know that WWE wants people to be on TV beaten to death and then come right over. So again, there's a lot. Ricky says that he's never turned down any creative. I've heard creative that didn't happen. Okay. And then that's when they stopped using him. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things in between. I know that there were ideas. Did he turn them down? I don't know, because he was pulled from everything. But when Tony Khan's thing is, if I believe you're going to WWE, I'm not going to use you. That's just his mentality. I'm not going to beat you like a drum all the way out. Plus guys can get real uncooperative. And if they are uncooperative and in a bad mood on your TV, it can lead to bad TV too. It's not like, it's a different business from in the 70s where it was all X's and O's and, you lose to put this other guy over. I mean, you lose doesn't even put people over if you're in a bad mood and everything like that, or people know. So it's a different, in a perfect world, Tony uses them, but 2 or 3 key people beat him on the way out and everyone's happy. It's not a perfect world. And it's, Tony's just not going to use them, I mean, he may use them next week but right now it appears like, he and Malakai Black and Ray Phoenix, they're all essentially gone. It's just a question of when their contract is up, and they're not going to be used on TV again, unless he changes his mind, which I don't expect to happen.
Last note on AEW, and obviously names that we're talking about here that may or may not be with the company moving forward. You brought up one there in Malakai or Alestair Black, depending on if/when he shows up back in WWE. That is the hot speculation right now. Of course, his faction has changed their names to the Hounds of Hell, so they're moving on without Aleister Black. Do you think he ends up back in NXT, or does he end up on the main roster? Because it's a very, very loaded scene, especially on the main roster right now.
He should be on the main roster. I mean, look, he made a lot of money in AEW. And they don't pay guys in NXT the kind of money that he was making in AEW. And they're usually not, I mean, there's always exceptions, but they're not into paying guys that kind of money for NXT. So my gut is that, same reason with Penta. It's like a lot of people thought he would go to NXT, and it's like, look, whatever they're paying him, which has got to be 7 figures. It's like you don't have somebody making 7 figures in NXT. It's just you don't. And so, yeah, I mean, I you can't say 100%, but my gut is, they could put him there for a short period of time, but, they have people who look over their books and paying that kind of money to someone in NXT is not something that they like to do.
Coming up next, here on McGuire on Wrestling, we're talking to Dave Meltzer, and we are less than a week away from WWE's Royal Rumble. Where do you think it's going to go? We'll find out from Dave next.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Hey, yo, how many of you here came to listen to your same generic wrestling podcast? Or how many of you came to listen to the alternate commentary table every single Saturday?
You're going to get our perspective of what the real fans of wrestling think, and no one does it like us.
Subscribe and stream to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed anywhere where you're streaming your podcasts. Survey says one more for the Greek guys.
Chair shot.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
We're talking to Dave Meltzer. We talked a lot about AEW just a few minutes ago. We're going to shift over across the street to WWE now with the Royal Rumble coming up. And of course, this is an interesting opportunity to start talking about TNA as well, because we've seen TNA contenders show up in Royal Rumbles in the past. We haven't seen a men's competitor yet, though. It's always been the women's Rumble matches so far. So do you think now with this new creative alliance and this new technical alliance here that we could see TNA talent make their way into the Royal Rumble?
I mean, for months I've been told Joe Hendry's in, so yeah. So I assume Joe Hendry's in, yeah. And others remains to be seen. I mean, obviously the interesting one would be Blanchard. I don't expect her. Okay. I mean, she might be, but that would be the one, because of all the women that are in TNA. I mean, that would be, she came out of the box and that pay-per-view and had just an incredible match. I mean, and she's, we all know she's got all the potential in the world and she's got all the baggage in the world. And, but yeah, I wouldn't expect.
But baggage isn't stopping WWE from doing much these days, though. I mean, they did trade Hogan out.
They certainly didn't get rid of Lee Fitting. They certainly used Punk. I mean, it's not baggage under their watch. When it's not baggage under their watch, they go in there with the idea there's no baggage. So yeah.
Tully was on Saturday Night's Main Event last night.
But still, she's 29, and it's been 6 years, and they haven't touched her, and they know how good she is. They've known from 2017 on. And so, there's a reason that they haven't touched her. There's a reason AEW hasn't touched her, which is probably about the same reason. Because, just ability and charisma wise, look, they made her world champion for the men in TNA. And then she didn't drop the title. So, I mean, there's just but, yeah, I mean, it's, I think that her TNA run is basically to, see what happens with the audience and then get her to WWE. I think that that's the goal,
Well, test the waters for sure. Yeah, the Joe Hendry thing is almost becoming an expectation among fans now. I mean, the memes are out. Everybody's waiting for it to happen. So we'll see if that takes place here. As for the Rumble itself, I know we've kind of danced around it a little bit as far as potential outcomes for the WrestleMania main events here. But the big question mark is still around John Cena and his involvement, I think. Does it make sense for him to win the Rumble, or do you want to put him in the Elimination Chamber?
Well, since the Elimination Chamber show is built around him, I would favor him not winning the Rumble and winning the Chamber. But they could do the other way. There's no reason, just the flip of the coin, whichever one you want to do. Kind of the way they do it, I would think that they would do the story from when it's being done is like, gonna win the Rumble, and then you don't, so you have more disappointment, and then you put it all in the Chamber. So I think that, my gut is that's what's going to happen, but it could happen the other way. But there's a couple of, I think Punk's a big favorite. I think Reigns obviously is a favorite. I've seen the betting favorite is Dwayne. I don't know that Dwayne's even in it, but it's not like Dwayne would need a training camp to come in at number 30 and then win. If he's doing WrestleMania, but then he would have to wrestle, in theory, Cody or Gunther. I don't see him coming back for Gunther, and he blew off Cody. If he's going to do Cody,
is there any room for him right now? They don't need him.
Well, you don't need anyone, but it's still if he wants to do it, he's going to get to do it. I mean, the most likely opponent is Roman, but he endorsed Roman the last time he was on TV. The feeling that I got from that is not even, it's more than the feeling. Basically told it was like they're leaving the door open, but it's not like it's something that they're necessarily doing this year at WrestleMania. They could, but it's up to him at the end. If he wants to do Roman at Mania, that's what they'll do. If he wants to do it somewhere else at some other time, that's what they'll do. If he's in the Rumble, there's no point in him being in the Rumble and not winning, put it that way. And if that's the case, then Roman has to win the championship, between now and probably March, right? Because you got to get the matches. He'd have to win the championship at Elimination Chamber, I would think, because he ain't running at the Rumble.
Well, it'll be interesting times, to say the least, here. Talking to Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer. WrestlingObserver.com is where you can find his latest writings every week, of course. Historic building in wrestling, now no longer. 1241 East Main Street, Stamford, Connecticut, is now sold and going to be turned into apartments by the sounds of things. How much would you pay to sleep in Vince McMahon's office? That's a bad question. Let's move on. Do you think they're going to keep the building up?
I wouldn't pay anything, but $3.75 million? It's like there's houses where I live that are $3.75 million. It's like, and that's a giant freaking building. And it's not like Stamford's a cheap place. I was stunned that was the sale price. I thought it'd be way, way more than that.
Do you think they're keeping the building, though?
Who?
Whoever bought it, the real estate firm.
Yeah, they're going to turn it into apartments.
Okay, but you could also raise that building and build a whole new one.
You could do that too, yeah.
Sure. I'm wondering if that was like a land property thing, because, the Titan Towers building, that's an old building to begin with.
It's not super old. I mean, it's not, it's 30 years, something like that, or maybe maybe they got it before that. I mean, it's not a new building. I'm trying to remember 1241 East Main. I don't remember the exact year they moved in, but I mean, I'm going to guess it was closing in on 4 decades. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, knowing the way developers work these days, that did seem like a remarkably low price. So I'm wondering if they found something in there that made the building obviously not worth buying, and they're just using it for the land.
Maybe it was because they felt Vince slept there for so long and it was haunted. I mean, Vince didn't go home all the time.
The chemical treatment on the carpets alone, Dave.
Can you imagine the stuff that's gone on? I mean, look, I read the lawsuit. That all happened in that building.
Oh, no, we're not going there. No. All right, well, I just thought I'd ask you, did you ever go to the building? Were you ever there?
Yeah, I've been in the building, yeah. I met Vince and everyone in that building, yeah.
I remember when it was there, I always wanted to go. Like, that was a dream spot to go to. And then I heard they don't like fans showing up. So I was like, okay.
No, they don't like fans showing
up.
That one. No.
But yeah, it was just interesting to see this big piece of WWE history gone. And now
they outgrew it, and they got a new place. They don't need the old place.
Last thing with Dave Meltzer this week here before we move on to your thoughts on Saturday night's main event this past weekend through our Yay Boost segment. I want to get your thoughts on the SNME from this past Saturday, and just overall, again, a big event. It had a big event feel. No title changes, no real crazy progression on a lot of things. But how'd you feel overall about the latest effort for NBC?
I thought it was an easy show to watch. I thought everything was fine. I will say that, like, the Gunther match was very good. Everything else was kind of like nothing special, nothing that you wouldn't see on a Monday. I mean, aside from the Gunther match, which was, better than usual, pay-per-view quality main event. The only other thing on the show that differentiates from any other thing was that Jesse was there, and Jesse was there the last time. So the novelty of Jesse wasn't a big deal. Obviously Hogan wasn't there. I don't know.
Oh yeah. How busy is the Hogan family right now? Because that was apparently why Hogan didn't show up at the show, was family commitments.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's out already that Nick got married, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. I'll just say that. It's like, I wonder, like, your son's getting married, and you tell the company a few days before, when you're in every commercial as the focal point going in. There's, I'm not in their minds, but the way it was portrayed and everything, even though I'm sure the wedding was legit and everything, and it's just like, if Nick knows that his dad's big return to national television is on this day, you know what I mean? It's like, you can get married the next weekend too. There's just so many things that make me think that while the story itself that we're told is true, there's far more to it that hasn't come out.
Surely the Hogan family would not fabricate a story to cover for a real reason of something.
I don't think him getting booed is going to deter WWE, because they've had babyfaces booed a million times. Frickin' Strowman, I don't know if he got booed, but it was like they certainly cheered Jacob against him. And the way the thing was laid out, they were going to. It's not like, oh my God, the fans reacted in a way we didn't expect. It was exactly like they all expected. So, I mean, it's like they understand that baby faces are going to get booed at times.
This is Jacob Fatu taking the Bronson Reed spot. It was the exact same thing, one more time, basically.
The exact angle, yeah, one more time.
Well, there's only one thing to do, and that is wait until next time to see what happens, I guess. Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer, always a pleasure, my friend. Before we let you go, what are some things people can read about in your latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter?
Big story on, actually, there's 2 stories regarding AEW, younger talent, development of younger talent. The other one is just different things that they could do to emphasize certain things. It's a pretty detailed story. Emphasize certain things, get things over. I mean, when you're number 2 and number 1's hot, it's a very tough spot historically. And, they're in it, and they have good stuff on TV all the time. They have great matches. Last night, freaking Takeshi and Shibata was a great match. Wednesday with Omega and Will Ospreay was a great angle. Toni Storm angle was a great angle. There's great stuff there, but I think that there's an emphasis issue that they really don't do well. So I was kind of explaining and going through, like, just different things that AEW could do to build more talent and build the future, and what their goal should be now.
All right. Well, Dave, always a pleasure. We will catch up again soon. Thank you, sir.
Okay, very welcome.
Coming up next, we look back at Saturday night's main event with your opinions. We're yaying and we're booing.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
From WrestleMania to SummerSlam to Halloween Havoc to Starrcade, wrestling had its golden era from the 80s through to the mid-2000s. Legends and Champions is where we open the vault. Legends and Champions comes to you as part of the McGuire on Wrestling Network each and every week. Get your midweek fix. You can get it from all good podcast providers just by searching for McGuire on Wrestling. Why wouldn't you? See you there.
Yay boo, it's lots of fun to do. If you like it, holla yay. If you don't, you holla boo.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
It's time to look back on Saturday night's main event with your point of view, and here to help us, as he always does, ladies and gentlemen, I love you, Joe Aguinaldo.
Yay!
How are you doing?
I will admit, just totally unwrestling related. I don't normally do this, but I started binge watching The Blacklist.
Okay.
So my sleep pattern for the last week has been horrible.
Oh,
horrible.
Dude. Yeah, I got caught up in a couple series like that. And the worst part is, you know what the thing with this binge watching now is after a while, you forget what you've seen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have I watched this show? Have I not?
It's almost like a mission now that it's like, okay, I don't care if I retain anything. Yeah. I just need to be able to say I saw it.
You gotta see it through.
Yeah. But like the very first night, I turned it on at about 10 o'clock. And at about 3 a.m. the next morning, I realized, oh crap, I have to be up in an hour. So I ended up taking like a half-hour nap before going to work on Monday.
Wow.
And it's been like that pretty much for the week. It's been horrible.
You know what I did? I sat through the entire Batman the Animated Series from the 90s.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I remember thinking that was such a great show when I was that age, and I got fond memories of that. And Kevin Conroy, I've got his autograph, the guy that voiced Batman and everything. I went back to that show. It does not hold up.
No, I felt the same way about the X-Men, the X-Men animated series. I love that when I was like younger, and then they re-released it, whatever it was, X-Men 97 or whatever. And I remember watching the first one going, you know what? I can't watch this or I'm going to ruin my memories of it. So
there were many times that they made Batman just kind of a wuss.
Yeah.
Like a real wuss. But go back and watch a couple episodes of that show, and you'll see an episode eventually where Batman wouldn't do that. You're Batman. You're the Knight. Well, speaking of the Knight, I actually watched it this morning because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, had a bit of extra duties yesterday with a certain Bret the Hitman Hart going all through Lethbridge. So I have some takes from it, but we're going to go through your feedback on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Yay Boo is what we do, and we talk about Saturday night's main event as a whole. Before we do that, Joe, I'm going to give you your take, and overall, the show, yay or boo?
There were good parts of the show, but I'm giving it a boo.
Okay, what makes you give it the boo?
The Jacob Fatu Braun Strowman beatdown, awesome.
Right.
I did like Sheamus versus Braun Breaker. Great match. But the thing is, again, and I mentioned this the last time we did Yay Boo on a Saturday night's main event, it was a house show, but not as good as a house show.
Okay.
Had I known that we weren't going to podcast about this, I probably would have turned it off after the first match.
Wow.
Yeah, I just lost interest. And again, don't get me wrong, there were some great entertaining things on the show, but overall it was just like, eh. And I think part of it too is that you had a pretty good Raw coming out of the week, and we're going into the Royal Rumble next weekend. So I just didn't feel anything about that show. It was pretty meh to me.
Well, you are in the absolute minority here because
I am the only one.
Out of everybody that has commented, there's a lot of comments too. I was surprised because I posted it this morning while I was watching the show. But the yay boo for Saturday night's main event, an overwhelming yay across the board from everyone. Now, this sounds like we're going to be just, shoveling gold and pumping everybody's tires here, but there were some interesting side comments about it. Blaine Vandergreen, for example, says he says yay because it was some good wrestling, but very uneventful. Didn't feel like a special event, and I could see that. I thought out of 3 championships, one might turn. One might go over. And if anything, I thought it could be the Intercontinental again, because remember, they did that for Jey Uso.
Right.
He won it for 2 weeks and then lost it back to Breaker, and everybody seems to have forgotten now.
And if I could just sort of add to what Blaine said, I mean, that's basically my attitude, except he said yay, I said boo. That's really the difference.
Matthew Smith says yay for Jacob Fatu. Jake in Chicago says a much better Saturday nights than the last one. Main event and the IC match were both good. Rhea and Nia was decent. Jacob destroying Braun was excellent. Okay, I got to give my yay for Rhea Ripley. Talk about performing on a different level. I would put her against anybody else that was on that card last night. Anybody else. That includes Cody Rhodes. That includes Kevin Owens, which is saying something for me. And even above Shawn Michaels, because I thought Rhea Ripley just owned the moments.
Well, you know what? To sort of add on to that, okay, so if Rhea is now coming into her own or starting to become that big star, we got to talk about Jacob Fatu, because there's a guy who's at, I think, the beginning of this.
Yeah.
With the WWE. Actually, I'm going to throw some comments out from the Facebook page. Chris said that this was a yay for him, and he mentions Fatu specifically looks strong and potentially now the biggest and meanest dog in the yard. Matthew Smith, yay for Jacob Fatu. Jake Alomar from Chicago, yay for Jacob Fatu. Like Dimitri, same thing. Fatu and Owens were what we needed. But man, after that promo from Jacob Fatu, I think it was on SmackDown, you can see him now stepping out of whatever shadow that is and starting to come into his own. I'm really digging what I'm seeing from him.
Well, and that's just it. Randy Osga, same thing. Like a lot of these comments all say Jacob Fatu has it. Birthday boy, Scott Ainsworth. See, I told you I'd get it in, buddy. Down in Australia. He says, yay, couldn't really complain. They gave Sheamus an out to challenge again with the ref. I never expected Rhea to lose her belt here. Jacob has the rocket right now, as he should. You're absolutely right, Joe. Jacob Fatu is at the beginning point. Remember when we first started seeing it in Rhea Ripley and the Charlotte Flair feud was going on?
Yep.
And again, people will say, well, Jacob Fatu's always been this great. Yeah, but the rest of the world doesn't know. And no insulting to the guy, but I don't think he's as good as he can be.
No. Like, I think we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
And again, like I've known a little bit about Jacob Fatu, but where I started really noticing was when they gave him the mic on last Friday, and he just started going, and I was like, okay, not bad for your first time in front of a national TV audience. They gave him the mic, and he did not shy away from it. And I'm like, wow, I'm excited to see where this guy goes too.
We're doing a yay boo on WWE Saturday Night's Main Event right now. If you're just tuning in to McGuire on Wrestling on the radio or online. And yeah, Douglas says that they still manage to make it feel a little more special than a Raw or SmackDown. On a side note, does anyone else think Rhea was really injured when she attempted to do the Riptide and Jax fell on her? She was selling it like crazy afterwards. And I think that was just good salesmanship. But if she wasn't hurt, then that's amazing, because she put on the performance of a lifetime then. So we'll see what happens there. Devin says, yay for Fatu and Sheamus and Braun. Perfect show to DVR the way it was paced. Boo for Jey Uso's spear. It was worse than Big Justice.
Oh, dear.
I hope he wins most overrated in the Observer Awards. Well, we'll see what happens there. Easy Cleghorn says, yay, I guess. They're still not doing anything to actually take advantage of nationwide network TV. I disagree, and I'll tell you why in a second, he says. The sad reality is that Shawn was the best part of that show. He still knows how to have a level of intensity and believability that completely captivates you, which is something that Cody or Kevin nor anyone else in the roster weekly other than Phil. Okay, can we call him CM Punk? That's his, I know Phil is his name, but nobody says, ladies and gentlemen, come down the aisle, Phil. Anyway, weekly than Phil is honestly truly able to do. I disagree with a lot of this, respectfully. Shawn was great, but I think there was a lot of overperforming last night.
I wouldn't say he was the best part of the show. He might have got the best reaction being the home crowd, like the home crowd guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I personally, I thought I thought KO was the best part of that segment.
Absolutely.
I thought he his right down to his shirt, Cody sucks eggs. If you are an old school wrestling fan that knows about the Dusty Rhodes Terry Funk history,
yep.
I was just I popped in my living room. It was amazing.
There was that, and then he's doing all these little Bret Hart things too around Shawn Michaels. Like he was wearing the Hitman chalk line jacket there for the last couple weeks, which was great. But there was a little tiny thing. And again, me being the ultra Bret Hart nerd, noticed it immediately. As soon as they're hanging the belts on the thingy that comes down from the ceiling, he literally did what Bret did with the title every time. And he folded it up and he kissed it right on the center plate of the Winged Eagle and then handed it over to the referee.
Oh, yeah.
That was a Bret Hart move.
That's a deep cut there, dude. But yes, I remember him doing that.
Just that, as soon as I saw that, I was like, nicely done, Kevin. Nicely done.
Yeah, for me, it was the Cody sucks eggs. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, that is tremendous.
Last one here on our Yay Boo for today for Saturday night's main event. Overall, a yay from Craig Usher. Some great matches from Jacob destroying Braun. Contract signing was amazing and a big pop for the Sweet Chin music. Enjoyed a women's and IC title match as well. There you go. So that's some of your feedback. Again, you can keep it going on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. Yay Boo for Saturday night's main event. Next week, we have it scheduled that all of us, even maybe Andy, we'll see how it works out here, but because he's over in the UK and the time difference, but we're going to do a round table on WWE's Royal Rumble. So make sure you are following the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. We'll probably bring up some of your comments, but the entire crew, myself, Joe, Dimitri, Mitch, maybe Andy, maybe more. We're going to talk all about next Saturday's WWE Royal Rumble. So make sure you join us there. Joe, thank you for your help with another Yay Boo here, and we will be back with you again next week. In the meantime, if you're listening on the radio, check out the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page for your chance to be a part of the conversation, and you can also subscribe to the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. You get this show. You get the alternate commentary table. You get Legends and Champions with Andy Evans. And Joe, do you think we should finally put out another We've Seen a Movie?
You know, we've talked about it enough times. We probably should.
This is becoming the Veer Mahan of podcasts. Until next time, thank you for listening and letting us do what we do. Play safe, drive safe, happy. Seeing ya.
McGuire on Wrestling. Online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com, wherever you get your podcasts, and at McGuireShow.com.